have a very exciting project I want to make, which is a top with a really big bow on it. And for that, I got this plaid fabric. I originally wanted it to be pink, but I couldn't find one that I liked. But I think this brown will still work well. You don't need very much fabric for this, but the only reason I got so much is because I want to make matching pants, which I think I might make a different video on it. If you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe, and let's get started. For the pattern, I used the same pattern I used to make my pink dress that I made in another video, which if you have not seen, I show you exactly how I made it, so I recommend watching that if you want to make one as well. I cut one set from the main fabric and another set from the lining, which was just some scrap fabric I had on hand. I added interfacing to all of my pieces, including the lining. I normally don't add interfacing to the lining, but I thought, why not? More structure can't hurt in this project. I like to add my interfacing by fusing some of the fabric first before cutting them out because I find it easier to cut out the perfect shapes that way. Interfacing also sometimes shrinks when ironed, so if I were to cut out the shapes beforehand, it might become too small once I iron it on. And make sure that the interfacing is added to the correct side so that for the pieces you cut two of, the pieces should be mirrored. Then I pinned all the side seams together for both the lining and the main fabric. I just sewed down all the sides to attach them together. After ironing down all the seams, I put them right sides together and pinned along the top, making sure to match up all the seams. Then I sewed along that top edge. When ironing the seams, I ironed the seams of the lining fabric towards the center and the seams for the main fabric away from the center. This way, when they are sewn together, it reduces the bulk in the seams. And here, I'm just showing you where to sew and exactly what it should be looking like right now. Next, I added in the boning. I measured it out by putting the boning up to the seams and cutting it a little bit shorter than the bottom. I cut one for each seam, so 6 in total. I ironed it down so it was flat, then I sewed it into the lining by putting it between the seam allowance and the top and sewing over it. I sewed it into the lining so that you wouldn't be able to see the stitching from the outside. Now this is what it looked like, and next I opened it up so that I could understitch it. To understitch, I pressed the top seam towards the lining and top stitched it in place. This is so that none of the lining shows on the outside when it's being worn. It was now time to make the bow. I wanted my finished bow to be 14 by 35 centimeters, so I doubled each length and added 2 centimeters for the seam allowance. So the piece I ended up cutting out was 30 by 72 centimeters. I added interfacing to this as well. I feel like my iron is broken because water drips all over the place when I try to use it, and that makes my floor, ironing board and fabric wet, which I really don't like. And here you can see that I cut out my interfacing before ironing it on, so when I ironed it on, it shrank, making it a bit too small, which is why you shouldn't cut it out beforehand. I folded it in half right sides together so that I could sew along the long edge. Then I flipped it right sides out and put the seam in the middle because when it's folded up, you won't be able to see that part. And to give it a nice little touch, I sewed some bias binding along the top and bottom. And to fold it up, I marked the center and put the two edges to that mark and sewed it down so that it would stay in place. Then I had to make the ribbon section that goes under the bow. I wanted this part to be 14 by 20 centimeters when it was finished, so again I doubled each side and added 2 centimeters, making it 30 by 42 centimeters, which is what I cut out of my fabric. And I interfaced this part as well. This time I folded it wrong sides together and sewed along the long edge. The raw edge will be covered by bias tape anyway, so I didn't need to sew it wrong sides together and flip it right sides out. Then I folded the length in half and cut the diagonal so that when opened, it would have this ribbony look. I transferred the same angle to the other side so that it was even and cut that one as well. Next, I added bias tape all along the edge. The last part of the bow is the little middle section that will hold it all together. I didn't measure this part, I just cut out a strip of fabric that was wide and long enough to go around the bow after folding in each edge. I scrunched up the centers of the top and bottom section of the bow and hot glued it together before wrapping the middle section around the center. And this is what it looked like once that was all done. And before I forgot, I just added in my little tag on the lining. To attach the bow onto this top, I put the top up to myself and decided how low I wanted it, and then marked the center and put it where the marks crossed. I didn't want the stitching visible on the lining, so I flipped it inside out to sew it on just the main fabric. I made sure the middle part was secured on before also adding stitches to the edges of the bow so that those parts don't fall down. Now I needed to add in my zipper. It needs to be a separating zipper so that we can easily get in and out. Mine was too long, but that doesn't really matter because we can just cut it. If it's too short, then that's a problem. I like to put it in by first placing it how I want it to look when it's finished, then unzipping it, and then flipping each side over and pinning it down. After switching out my sewing foot to a zipper foot, I sewed each side just on the main fabric and not the lining. And then I zipped it up and marked on the other zipper where it hits the top to make sure that I sew up the same amount so that where the top parts meet are even. I repeated the same thing to the other side as well. When sewing it in, I made sure not to put it all the way at the bottom because I'm going to sew that part next. I folded in the extra length of the zipper and sewed it down before snipping off the excess. I ironed in each side so that the zipper was facing in the right way, and I folded over the same amount on the lining and ironed that down as well. To put the bottom edge together, I pinned them right sides together and sewed along the bottom. I made sure that the bow was not caught in the stitches, and here I'm just showing you where you need to stitch. And once that is done, I flipped it right sides out. This can be a bit tricky with the bow in the middle, but I just tried my best to keep the bow in as good of a condition as I could. I ironed that down, and the last step is to secure the zipper onto the lining. To do this, I folded over the part I previously folded down and ironed and just top stitched it in place. I cut off any loose threads and then it was all done! I think this top came out really cute and I am super excited to make the matching pants for them. It's so perfect for summer and I'm so glad I got to make something I've been really wanting to. And thank you if you made it to the end of this video, and if you liked it, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. See you next time!